For centuries, we've been told that human history follows a neat, logical timeline, that progress moves slowly from primitive survival to advanced civilization, from stone tools to cities, from myth to science. But archaeology keeps uncovering discoveries that don't fit the story. A forgotten massacre frozen in time at Sandby Borg, where entire families were executed and left unburied. A Stone Age site like Göbekli Tepe, where massive stone monuments were built thousands of years before farming or cities should have existed. An underground army of 8,000 warriors guarding an emperor in death at the Terracotta Army. Giant drawings carved into the desert at the Nazca Lines, so large they can only be understood from the sky. A corroded lump of bronze from the sea that turned out to be the Antikythera shipwreck, containing a machine more complex than anything humanity was supposed to build for another 1,000 years. Some suggest advanced knowledge appeared far earlier than expected. Others hint that entire cultures vanished, taking their secrets with them. And a few raise a far more unsettling question. How much of human history has been lost or rewritten by time? Tonight, we are exploring 13 strange ancient discoveries archaeologists can't fully explain, from mysterious burials and impossible machines to monuments that should never have existed. Because the deeper we dig into the past, the clearer one truth becomes. History is far stranger than we were ever taught. Sandby Borg Massacre. When archaeologists began excavating Sandby Borg, a small 5th century ring fort on the island of Öland in southeastern Sweden, they expected the usual fragments of Iron Age life: pottery shards, animal bones, traces of hearths, and perhaps a few scattered human remains. What they did not expect was to uncover one of the most haunting and unexplained mass killings in European prehistory. The first skeleton was discovered lying face down on the floor of a house, exactly where the person had fallen nearly 1,500 years earlier. There was no burial, no grave goods arranged with care, and no evidence of ritual treatment. At first, archaeologists assumed it was an anomaly, perhaps someone who died suddenly or was left unburied due to unusual circumstances. But then they found another body, and another, and another. As excavation continued, a chilling pattern emerged. Bodies were scattered throughout the settlement, inside homes, near doorways, and along streets. Men, women, and even children were among the dead. Many skulls showed clear signs of violent trauma, crushing blows from clubs, deep sword cuts, and axe wounds powerful enough to split bone. Some victims appeared to have been struck from behind, suggesting execution rather than combat. Others had defensive injuries, frozen in the final moments of a desperate struggle. What disturbed researchers most was not just how these people died, but what happened afterward. They were never buried. In Iron Age Scandinavia, burial customs were deeply important, whether through cremation or inhumation. Leaving bodies exposed was unthinkable, both culturally and spiritually. Yet at Sandby Borg, the dead were simply abandoned. Their remains lay where they fell as roofs collapsed, walls crumbled, and centuries of soil slowly sealed them away. It was as if the entire settlement had been erased from memory overnight. By the time archaeologists had finished surveying the excavated sections, they had identified the remains of at least 26 individuals, though researchers believe this may represent only a fraction of the total death toll. Based on the size of the fort, the number of victims could be significantly higher, possibly dozens more still buried beneath untouched structures. One small detail made the massacre even more unsettling. Among the remains was a half-eaten fish, found beside one of the bodies. This seemingly insignificant object tells a powerful story. It suggests that the attack came without warning, striking in the middle of daily life. People were eating, working, and going about ordinary routines when the violence erupted. There was no time to flee, no time to hide valuables, no time to mount an organized defense. And valuables there were: coins, jewelry, brooches, and finely crafted personal items were found, scattered throughout the site. This immediately ruled out one obvious explanation: robbery. If attackers had come to loot the settlement, they inexplicably left behind objects of clear wealth and status. Whoever carried out the massacre was not interested in plunder, or at least not in material gain. This raises the central mystery of Sandby Borg. Who were the attackers, and why did they kill everyone? One leading theory suggests the massacre was the result of inter-community violence. During the 5th century, Scandinavia was a volatile region undergoing major social and political change. The collapse of the Western Roman Empire disrupted trade networks, power structures shifted, and local elites competed fiercely for control. Sandby Borg may have belonged to a wealthy or influential group that made powerful enemies. Some researchers believe the attack was an act of revenge or punishment, a deliberate extermination meant to send a message. The fact that the bodies were left unburied supports this idea. In many ancient cultures, denying burial was a profound humiliation, condemning the dead to unrest and shame in the afterlife. Leaving the corpses to rot could have been intentional, a warning to others who might oppose the attackers. Another unsettling theory is that the survivors, if any existed, were forbidden from returning. Perhaps the attackers claimed the land or imposed a taboo so strong that no one dared to bury the dead. Over time, the site may have become a place of fear, whispered about but avoided, eventually fading into legend. What makes Sandby Borg especially eerie is that there is no evidence of rebuilding. Many Iron Age settlements were destroyed and later reoccupied, but Sandby Borg was left untouched. For centuries, no one reclaimed the homes, repaired the walls, or honored the dead. The fort stood as a silent, decaying monument to sudden annihilation. Modern archaeologists have compared the site to a time capsule of violence, preserved not by intention, but by abandonment. Unlike battlefields where bodies are moved or disturbed, Sandby Borg offers a rare, frozen snapshot of a single catastrophic event. It captures a moment when an entire community vanished in the span of hours. Despite years of research, the identities of the attackers remain unknown. There are no written records, no inscriptions, no weapons left behind that clearly point to a specific group. DNA analysis has helped identify relationships among some of the victims, suggesting families lived and died together, but it has not revealed who killed them. In interviews, archaeologists have described the emotional weight of the site. Excavating Sandby Borg is not just a scientific endeavor, it is an encounter with raw human tragedy. Every skeleton tells a story of interrupted life, meals never finished, children never grown, futures violently erased. Today, Sandby Borg stands as one of the most disturbing archaeological discoveries in Europe. It challenges our understanding of Iron Age society and reminds us that extreme brutality did not begin with recorded history. Entire communities could disappear without explanation, leaving behind only bones, broken walls, and unanswered questions. More than 1,500 years later, the massacre still refuses to give up its secrets. Who ordered the attack? What crime, or perceived insult, was severe enough to justify the extermination of an entire settlement? And why was Sandby Borg left to decay, its dead unburied, as if cursed? Until those questions are answered, the Sandby Borg massacre remains a chilling reminder that some of the darkest chapters of human history are written not in books, but buried silently beneath the earth. Panga Saidi, 78,000 years of human occupation, hidden within the coastal forests of southeastern Kenya, lies one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries ever made, a site that quietly rewrote what scientists thought they knew about human survival, adaptation, and continuity. Known as Panga Saidi, this network of limestone caves preserves an almost uninterrupted record of human occupation stretching back approximately 78,000 years, making it one of the longest known habitation sites in human history. What makes Panga Saidi truly strange isn't just its age, It's the fact that humans kept returning to the same place through dramatic shifts in climate, technology, culture, and even species-level evolution. While civilizations rose and fell elsewhere, this cave system remained a reliable refuge, generation after generation, for tens of thousands of years. The discovery was led by an international team of archaeologists under the direction of Michael Petraglia, currently the director of the Australian Research Centre for Human Evolution. Speaking to Haaretz, Petraglia emphasized how unusual the site is, not as a single moment frozen in time, but as a continuous human story layered through millennia. At the heart of the cave network is a massive main chamber measuring over 1,000 square feet, large enough to shelter hundreds of people at once. This was not a cramped hideout or temporary shelter. It was a long-term living space. Evidence suggests it served as a base camp where people cooked food, made tools, slept, raised children, and possibly conducted rituals, all while the outside world changed in ways that could have wiped them out. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding Panga Saudi is how it managed to stay habitable for so long. The answer appears to lie in its location. Nestled within a tropical forest near the Kenyan coast, the cave system benefited from an unusually stable climate. While much of Africa endured extreme droughts, shifting deserts, and ecological collapse over tens of thousands of years, this region maintained relatively consistent rainfall and abundant resources. Fresh water, plant foods, and game animals would have been readily available, making it a natural refuge during harsh climatic periods. In other words, while other human populations were forced to migrate or died out entirely, the people of Panga Saidi stayed. Excavations revealed large, heavy stone tools in the deepest layers of sediment, dating back nearly 78,000 years to the Middle Stone Age. These early tools were simple but effective, likely used for cutting meat, breaking bones, and processing plants. Their size and design suggest a population focused on survival rather than specialization. But as researchers dug upward through the layers of time, something remarkable appeared. Around 67,000 years ago, the tools began to change. Smaller, more refined stone blades and specialized arrowheads started to emerge, signaling a major cognitive and technological shift. This transition reflects advances in hunting strategies, planning, and possibly even social organization. The inhabitants were no longer just reacting to their environment, they were mastering it. What's especially strange is that these technological changes occurred without any clear break in occupation. There is no evidence that one group replaced another. Instead, it appears that the same population gradually adapted and innovated over thousands of years. This challenges older theories that major technological leaps required migration or replacement by more advanced humans. At Panga Saidi, progress happened locally. Even more intriguing is what researchers didn't find. Unlike many later prehistoric sites, Panga Saidi shows little evidence of early symbolic behavior, no cave paintings, elaborate carvings, or dramatic ritual objects in the earliest layers. Instead, the evolution of technology and culture seems slow, steady, and practical. This suggests that human innovation didn't always explode suddenly. It sometimes unfolded quietly over tens of millennia. As the layers approach more recent times, the artifacts continue to evolve. Tools become increasingly diverse, indicating broader diets and more complex lifestyles. Evidence of trade appears in the form of materials sourced from distant regions, hinting at early social networks that stretched far beyond the cave itself. Yet, despite all these changes, the cave never lost its importance. Why did generation after generation return to the same place? One possibility is cultural memory. The location may have been passed down through oral tradition as a safe haven, a place known to offer protection, water, and resources even when the world outside became hostile. In this sense, Panga Saidi may represent one of humanity's earliest examples of a home remembered across deep time. Another unsettling idea is that the cave's survival record makes it an outlier, not the norm. If most ancient sites were abandoned or destroyed by climate change, erosion, or human conflict, then Panga Saidi survived simply because it was lucky, positioned in just the right place to escape catastrophe. This raises the possibility that many similar long-term habitation sites once existed but were erased completely. That thought alone makes the discovery feel almost miraculous. To archaeologists, Panga Saidi is more than just an ancient shelter. It is a living archive of human resilience. It captures how early humans adapted to environmental stress without agriculture, cities, or written language. It shows that survival didn't always require constant migration. Sometimes it depended on finding one perfect place and holding on to it for as long as possible. Today, the cave continues to challenge long-held assumptions about human evolution. Rather than a linear march of progress punctuated by sudden revolutions, Panga Saidi tells a different story, one of continuity, patience, and gradual change. Humans didn't just conquer new lands, they learned how to endure. After nearly 80,000 years of occupation, the cave finally fell silent in modern times. But the traces left behind, stone tools, ash layers, food remains, and sediments, still speak. They tell the story of people who lived through ice ages, droughts, and transformations we can barely comprehend. And perhaps the strangest part of all is this. While modern civilization has existed for only a few thousand years, Panga Saidi was already ancient when the first pyramids were built. In the shadowed chambers of this Kenyan cave, humanity didn't just pass through history, it stayed. Hierakonpolis and the mystery of injured zoo animals more than 5,000 years ago, long before the pyramids rose from the desert sands, Hierakonpolis stood as one of the most powerful and influential cities along the Nile River. Often described as a cradle of early Egyptian civilization, the city was a political, religious, and economic center during Egypt's pre-dynastic period. Its elites ruled wealth, trade, and ritual life, laying the groundwork for the civilization that would later astonish the world. But one of the strangest discoveries made at Hierakonpolis has nothing to do with kings, temples, or warfare. It involves injured zoo animals. During excavations of a cemetery associated with the city's elite residents, archaeologists uncovered something entirely unexpected: the skeletal remains of exotic animals buried with care. Among them were 2 elephants, several baboons, a hippopotamus, and other wild species that had no natural reason to be living together in close proximity to a human settlement. At first glance, the finds suggested status and spectacle. In ancient Egypt, exotic animals were symbols of immense power. Owning creatures that came from distant lands or were dangerous to capture was a visible declaration of wealth, influence, and dominance over nature. Much like private menageries or early zoos, these animals served as living proof that Hierakonpolis's elites had the resources to control the wild. But a closer look at the bones told a far more disturbing and mysterious story. Several of the animal skeletons, particularly the baboons and the hippopotamus, showed clear signs of severe bone fractures. Limbs had been broken, joints had been damaged. In some cases, the injuries were so serious that they would have been fatal in the wild. Yet the bones had healed. This detail changed everything. Bone healing requires time, rest, and protection. A baboon with a shattered limb or a hippo with fractured bones would not survive long in nature. Predators, starvation, or infection would quickly claim them. The fact that these animals lived long enough for their injuries to heal means only one thing: they were being kept alive by humans. Researchers believe many of the injuries likely occurred during capture. Elephants, baboons, and hippos are not passive animals. They resist confinement violently. Ropes, restraints, and enclosures primitive by modern standards, would have caused stress injuries, falls, and fractures. Others may have been hurt while being tied in place or confined in restricted spaces not suited to their natural behavior. Yet, despite these injuries, the animals were not abandoned. They were protected, fed, and housed long enough for their bones to knit back together. This suggests a level of long-term captivity that goes far beyond occasional ritual sacrifice or symbolic ownership. These animals were not temporary trophies. They were maintained, possibly for years. This raises unsettling questions. Why were the elites of Hierakonpolis keeping such dangerous and demanding animals alive? One possibility is religious significance. Many animals held symbolic meaning in early Egyptian belief systems. Baboons, for example, were associated with the sun god and later with Thoth, the god of wisdom. Hippos were linked to both chaos and protection, embodying forces that needed to be controlled rather than destroyed. Keeping these animals captive may have been a way of demonstrating cosmic order, the triumph of human authority and divine favor over nature's chaos. Another theory is pure political theater. Imagine the impact of a local ruler displaying living elephants or hippos to visiting rivals or subjects. Such a spectacle would instantly establish dominance. These were not pets in the modern sense. They were living symbols of power, no different from monumental architecture or lavish burial goods. Still, the physical evidence paints a grim picture of life for the animals themselves. The healed fractures suggest prolonged suffering. Without modern veterinary knowledge, treatments would have been crude at best. Immobilization, feeding, and protection were likely achieved through confinement rather than care. The animals survived, but at a cost. Interestingly, the animals were eventually buried in what appears to be a formal cemetery context, not discarded like refuse. This implies that even after death, they held value or meaning. They were not simply tools. They were part of the social and symbolic world of Hierakonpolis. This discovery also pushes back the timeline of animal captivity and proto-domestication. While ancient Egypt is famous for cats, cattle, and later sacred animals, the Hierakonpolis finds show that humans were experimenting with controlling and maintaining wild, non-domesticated species far earlier than previously thought. Importantly, these animals were not domesticated in the traditional sense. They were not bred selectively or integrated into everyday labor. Instead, they represent an early and uneasy stage of human-animal relationships, one defined by domination, fascination, and experimentation. In that sense, Hierakonpolis may represent one of the world's earliest examples of a zoo-like environment centuries before similar practices appeared elsewhere. The city's elites were pushing the boundaries of what humans could control, both socially and biologically. The discovery also forces archaeologists to confront an uncomfortable reality. Early civilizations were not only innovative and artistic, they were also exploitative. Power often came at the expense of the vulnerable, whether human or animal. The injured bones preserved in the Egyptian soil are silent witnesses to that truth. Yet from a scientific perspective, the find is invaluable. Without written records from this early period, bones are the only storytellers. The healed fractures, burial contexts, and species diversity offer rare insight into how early societies viewed animals, not just as food or threats, but as symbols, tools, and extensions of elite identity. Today, the injured animals of Hierakonpolis remain one of the strangest and most revealing archaeological discoveries in ancient Egypt. They blur the line between reverence and cruelty, care and captivity. They show that even at the dawn of civilization, humans were already reshaping the natural world in ways both impressive and deeply troubling. Thousands of years later, their bones still ask the same haunting question: How far has humanity always been willing to go to prove its power? Sunghir, children with disabilities buried like royalty around 34,000 years ago, long before agriculture, cities, or written language. A group of Ice Age hunter-gatherers carried out one of the most astonishing burial rituals ever discovered. At a site now known as Sunghir, east of present-day Moscow, they buried several members of their community, including 2 adolescent boys, in a way that has left modern archaeologists deeply unsettled and profoundly moved. The reason is simple. These children were buried like royalty. Sunghir was excavated in the mid-20th century, and at first glance it appeared to be another Upper Paleolithic campsite. Stone tools, animal bones, and traces of habitation suggested a group of mobile hunters living in a harsh, cold environment dominated by mammoths, reindeer, and woolly rhinoceroses. Survival during this period required constant movement, cooperation, and physical endurance. Life was short, and every member of the group was expected to contribute. That's what makes the Sunghir burials so strange. Among the graves were 2 adolescent boys, believed to be around 10 and 12 years old at the time of death. They were buried together in a single grave, positioned carefully, with their heads placed side by side, facing opposite directions. The symmetry of the burial alone suggests intentional planning and ritual significance, but the true shock came when archaeologists examined the bodies themselves. Both boys showed clear signs of severe physical disabilities. One child suffered from a condition that would have significantly impaired movement, possibly making walking painful or impossible. The other had skeletal abnormalities indicating long-term health issues that would have limited strength, coordination, or stamina. In a society where survival depended on hunting large animals and traveling long distances, these children would not have been able to fully support themselves. Yet, they survived into adolescence. That fact alone is extraordinary. It means the community must have cared for them for years, providing food, protection, and assistance despite the cost. But even that revelation pales in comparison to what they were buried with. The boys' graves contained an almost unimaginable wealth of grave goods. Archaeologists counted over 10,000 mammoth ivory beads, painstakingly carved and sewn onto clothing or burial garments. Creating just one bead could take hours of labor using stone tools. Producing thousands would have required thousands of hours of work, a massive investment of time and effort by the group. Alongside the beads were more than 20 ivory armbands, approximately 300 pierced fox teeth, and an astonishing 16 full-length mammoth ivory spears. Objects so finely crafted, they were likely ceremonial rather than practical. There were also carved artifacts, antlers, and even human fibulae, leg bones, deliberately laid across the chest of each child. The level of symbolism is overwhelming. These were not random objects. Mammoth ivory was rare, difficult to obtain, and extremely valuable. Fox teeth may have carried spiritual meaning, possibly linked to hunting magic or protection. The spears, far too delicate for real combat, appear to represent power, status, or identity rather than utility. And then there's the most baffling detail of all. The adult burials at Sunghir were comparatively modest. One adult male, possibly a leader or elder, was buried with some beads and ornaments, but nothing approaching the sheer scale of wealth given to the 2 children. This completely contradicts what archaeologists would expect. In most ancient societies, status is earned through age, achievement, or leadership. Children, especially those with disabilities, are rarely afforded such elaborate treatment. So why here? One theory is that the boys were born into a special lineage, perhaps the children of a powerful shaman, leader, or spiritually significant family. Even if they could not contribute physically, their bloodline alone may have granted them immense symbolic value. Another possibility is even more intriguing. the children themselves may have been viewed as spiritually powerful. In many traditional societies, individuals who are physically different are sometimes believed to exist closer to the spiritual world. Their disabilities may have been interpreted not as weaknesses, but as signs of supernatural significance, people who walked between worlds. The extraordinary burial could reflect reverence rather than pity. There is also the haunting possibility that the burial represents a sacrificial ritual, though there is no direct evidence of violence or forced death. Still, the deliberate pairing of the children, the mirrored positioning, and the symbolic objects raise questions about whether their deaths were seen as cosmically important events rather than personal tragedies. What is undeniable is the level of emotional and social investment involved. To create these grave goods, the community would have needed to divert enormous resources, time that could have been spent hunting, tool making, or preparing for winter. In a world where survival was never guaranteed, choosing to honor two disabled children so extravagantly speaks volumes about their values. Sunghir completely dismantles the long-held assumption that early humans were purely pragmatic, ruthless survivors who abandoned those who couldn't contribute. Instead, it paints a picture of a society capable of compassion, symbolism, and complex belief systems tens of thousands of years before civilization as we know it. It also challenges modern ideas about disability. Rather than being marginalized, these children appear to have been central figures in death, perhaps even more honored than able-bodied adults. Their burial suggests that worth was not measured solely by physical capability, but by social, spiritual, or symbolic importance. The presence of human bones, specifically fibulae, laid across the children's chests, adds another layer of mystery. These may have belonged to ancestors, serving as protective relics, or linking the children to a lineage stretching back generations. If so, the burial becomes not just a farewell, but a statement about continuity, memory, and identity. To archaeologists, Sunghir is one of the most emotionally powerful sites ever discovered. It forces us to confront a reality that feels almost uncomfortable. People living 34,000 years ago may have practiced forms of care, ritual, and reverence that rival or surpass those of later societies. These were not primitive humans in the way the term is often imagined. They were people capable of grief, symbolism, long-term planning, and moral complexity. They made deliberate choices about who mattered, and those choices defy modern expectations. Today, the Sunghir children remain silent, but their burial speaks louder than words. Wrapped in ivory, surrounded by symbols of power and protection, they challenge our assumptions about the past and force us to rethink what it truly meant to be human in the deep ice age. In a time defined by cold, danger, and scarcity, a small community chose to honor two vulnerable children as if they were kings. And that may be the strangest, most powerful discovery of all. Atacama and the mystery of advanced Stone Age tools. For decades, scientists believed they had a fairly clear timeline for one of the most important chapters in human history, the rise of modern humans and their technological superiority. According to genetic evidence, more than 90% of living humans descend from a relatively small population of Homo sapiens that left Africa around 60,000 years ago. This group, researchers argued, spread rapidly across the globe because they possessed something their rivals did not: advanced stone tools. Instead of heavy, clumsy hand axes, these early modern humans carried thin, sharp stone blades, often hafted onto wooden spears. These tools were lighter, deadlier, and more versatile. They allowed for more efficient hunting, better food processing, and improved survival. In short, superior technology may have given modern humans the edge they needed to outcompete other hominins. But then, archaeologists turned their attention to southern India, and everything became complicated. At a site known as Atacama, located in present-day Tamil Nadu, researchers uncovered stone tools that simply should not exist according to the traditional timeline. These artifacts were not crude hand axes associated with early humans hundreds of thousands of years ago. Instead, they closely resembled the advanced blade-based tools that scientists had long believed only appeared much later, and only in Africa. Even more shocking was their age. Using advanced dating techniques, researchers determined that some of the tools at Atirampakam were over 200,000 years old, more than 140,000 years earlier than the supposed African exodus of modern humans. This meant that people living in India were producing sophisticated stone technology at a time when, according to conventional models, such innovation shouldn't have existed outside Africa. The implications were enormous. The tools themselves tell a story of technical skill and planning. Unlike bulky hand axes, which were often shaped by removing large flakes from a core, the Atirampakam artifacts show evidence of prepared core techniques. This method requires the toolmaker to carefully plan each strike in advance, shaping the stone core so that thin, uniform blades can be removed intentionally rather than accidentally. This kind of thinking reflects advanced cognitive ability, the capacity to visualize an end product before it exists and to execute a multi-step process to achieve it. So, who made these tools? That question remains unanswered. One possibility is that early waves of Homo sapiens left Africa far earlier than previously believed. Rather than a single dramatic migration 60,000 years ago, humans may have dispersed in multiple waves, some of which reached South Asia over 200,000 years ago. These early migrants may have developed advanced technology independently, or carried it with them from Africa. If true, this would mean that the story of human migration is far more complex than a simple out-of-Africa event followed by global domination. Another possibility is even more unsettling to established theories. Different hominin species may have independently invented similar technologies. In this scenario, the toolmakers at Atirampakam were not modern humans at all, but another archaic human species, perhaps an early form of Homo erectus or a closely related hominin. Faced with similar survival challenges, these populations may have arrived at the same technological solutions without any direct connection to African innovations. This concept, known as convergent evolution, is well documented in biology, but far more controversial when applied to human cognition. If correct, it suggests that advanced tool-making was not unique to modern humans, and that intelligence and innovation arose multiple times in different parts of the world. Either explanation is revolutionary. What makes the discovery even stranger is how long these tools went unnoticed. For decades, archaeological research in India was limited compared to Africa and Europe. Many sites were overlooked, poorly dated, or dismissed as unimportant. Atirampakam had been known since the 19th century, but only modern excavation methods and precise dating revealed just how ancient and how advanced the tools really were. This raises an uncomfortable question. How many other groundbreaking discoveries are still buried simply because no one has looked closely enough? The Atirampakam site also blurs the boundary between what archaeologists call the Lower Paleolithic and Middle Paleolithic periods. Traditionally, these eras were separated by clear technological shifts, but here those transitions appear gradual and overlapping, suggesting that human technological evolution was not a clean, linear process. Instead of a sudden revolution, innovation may have emerged slowly, unevenly, and in multiple places at once. This challenges one of the most deeply ingrained assumptions in human evolutionary studies, that modern humans were uniquely innovative, while other hominins lagged behind. If advanced tools existed in India 200,000 years ago, then technological superiority alone cannot explain why modern humans eventually dominated the planet. So what did? Some researchers now argue that social structures, language, cooperation, or cultural transmission not tools, may have been the true advantage of Homo sapiens. Others suggest that climate fluctuations periodically wiped out advanced populations, leaving only fragments of their achievements behind. In that sense, the Atirampakam tools may represent the remnants of a lost chapter in human history, a moment when advanced technology flourished, only to vanish due to environmental catastrophe, population collapse, or competition with other groups. There is also the haunting possibility that early innovation was far more common than we think, but left little trace. Stone tools survive because stone endures. But wooden weapons, fibers, shelters, and early clothing, all critical components of survival, are largely invisible to archaeology. What we see may be only a tiny fraction of what once existed. Today, Atirampakam stands as one of the most intriguing and disruptive archaeological discoveries of the modern era. It forces scientists to rethink migration, intelligence, and the uniqueness of modern humans. It suggests that our ancestors, or close relatives, were experimenting, innovating, and adapting far earlier than expected. Most unsettling of all, it implies that human history may not be a single upward climb led by one extraordinary group, but a tangled web of forgotten innovations, parallel breakthroughs, and vanished populations. The stone blades of southern India sit silently in museum drawers and research labs, sharp edges dulled by time but not by meaning. They whisper a simple, uncomfortable truth. We may not be as unique or as alone in our brilliance as we once believed. Range Creek Canyon and the hidden treasures of Utah. For nearly a century, one of the most astonishing archaeological landscapes in North America remained hidden in plain sight, not because it was buried underground, but because one family chose silence. Tucked away in the remote canyon lands of eastern Utah lies Range Creek, a rugged 4,000-acre stretch of mesas, cliffs, and winding canyons that appears untouched by time. For generations, this land belonged to a local ranching family, led in later years by Waldo Wilcox, a quiet cattleman who inherited more than just grazing land from his father. He inherited a secret. Scattered across the property were ancient pit houses, mysterious stone alignments, rock paintings, granaries, and countless stone tools, clear evidence of a prehistoric culture that had lived, hunted, and built there more than 1,000 years ago. Yet while looters ravaged archaeological sites across the American Southwest throughout the 20th century, Range Creek remained almost perfectly preserved. The reason was simple. No one knew what was there. Like his father before him, Wilcox never spoke publicly about the ruins. He posted road-closed signs, locked gates, and discouraged hunters or hikers from venturing into the canyon. Outsiders assumed the land was empty, unremarkable ranch country. In reality, it was one of the most pristine archaeological landscapes ever discovered in the United States. The artifacts left behind belonged to a mysterious group archaeologists now call the Fremont culture, a prehistoric people who inhabited parts of present-day Utah, Colorado, Nevada, and Idaho between roughly AD 300 and 1300. Unlike their better-known neighbors, such as the ancestral Puebloans, Fremont left behind fewer large stone cities, but what they did leave behind is deeply enigmatic. At Range Creek, their presence is everywhere. The canyon walls are marked with rock art, paintings and petroglyphs depicting human figures, animals, geometric shapes, and symbols whose meanings are still debated. On mesas and valley floors lie the remains of pit houses, semi-subterranean dwellings that once sheltered families from harsh winters and summer heat. Stone tools, projectile points, grinding stones, and pottery fragments litter the ground, exactly where they were dropped centuries ago. What makes this discovery so extraordinary is not just its scale, but its condition. Most archaeological sites in the American West were heavily looted During the 19th and early 20th centuries, pot hunters dug indiscriminately, removing artifacts without recording their context, destroying priceless historical information in the process. By contrast, Range Creek was effectively sealed off from this destruction. When professional archaeologists were finally allowed to survey the land in the early 2000s, they were stunned. Entire villages lay intact. Granaries still clung to cliff faces. Trails worn by ancient feet were still visible in the soil. In some places, artifacts rested on the surface exactly as they had been left a millennium earlier. Researchers described it as an archaeological time capsule, a snapshot of Fremont life frozen in place. One of the most puzzling elements of the site is the presence of long, carefully arranged rock alignments stretching across ridges and valley floors. Their purpose remains unknown. Some researchers believe they may have served as hunting aids, guiding animals into traps. Others suggest they had ceremonial or astronomical significance, marking seasonal changes or ritual boundaries. No definitive answers exist. The Fremont culture itself remains something of a mystery. They practiced a mixed lifestyle, farming maize like their Puebloan neighbors, while also relying heavily on hunting and foraging. They built pit houses rather than stone pueblos and created distinctive rock art that looks unlike anything else in the region. Then, around 700 years ago, they vanished. There is no clear evidence of mass migration, warfare, or collapse. The Fremont simply disappear from the archaeological record, leaving behind their homes, tools, and symbols, but no written explanation. Range Creek offers one of the best chances archaeologists have ever had to understand who they were and what happened to them. Ironically, this priceless scientific opportunity exists because nothing happened there for nearly 100 years. Waldo Wilcox was not an archaeologist. He was not trying to preserve history. He simply wanted to run his ranch in peace. But his decision to keep quiet, combined with the canyon's remoteness, saved an irreplaceable chapter of human history. Eventually, age caught up with him. Unable to manage the ranch any longer, Wilcox made a decision that would change archaeology in the American West forever. He sold the property to the Bureau of Land Management, ensuring that the land would be protected rather than developed or divided. Today, Range Creek is overseen in partnership with the Utah Museum of Natural History, which manages research, conservation, and limited access. To prevent damage, much of the canyon remains closed to the general public, and archaeological work proceeds cautiously and methodically. What researchers are learning is reshaping how we understand Fremont society. Because the site is so undisturbed, archaeologists can study not just individual artifacts, but patterns of daily life, how homes were arranged, how food was stored, where rituals may have occurred, and how communities interacted with their environment. These insights are almost impossible to recover at looted sites. Range Creek has also changed attitudes about land stewardship. It stands as a rare example of how private ownership inadvertently protected cultural heritage, and how quiet respect for land can sometimes preserve history better than public attention. Yet, the story carries an eerie undertone. For centuries, the Fremont people lived, worked, raised families, and created meaning in Range Creek. Then they were gone. For nearly 1,000 years after that, their world remained untouched, until modern humans rediscovered it by accident. The canyon is filled with unanswered questions. Why did Fremont choose this place? What do their symbols mean? Why did their culture disappear while others survived? And how many similar sites were lost forever before anyone realized their importance? Range Creek reminds us that history does not always announce itself with monuments or ruins visible from afar. Sometimes it waits quietly, protected by isolation, secrecy, and chance, until the right moment arrives. Hidden beneath Utah's rugged landscape was a story untouched by looters, tourists, and time. Thanks to one rancher's silence, that story survived, and in the winding canyons of Range Creek, the past still whispers, largely undisturbed and still not fully understood. Terracotta Army, the silent army beneath the earth. In the spring of 1974, a group of farmers digging a simple well near the city of Xi'an in central China struck something solid. At first, they assumed it was an old pot or a buried wall, nothing unusual in a region rich with ancient history. But when a life-size clay head emerged from the soil, staring back with a stern, frozen expression, it became instantly clear that this was no ordinary find. What those laborers had uncovered was the gateway to one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time. As Chinese archaeologists began excavating the area, the scale of the discovery grew beyond anyone's imagination. One statue became dozens, dozens became hundreds, and eventually the true number emerged, an estimated 8,000 life-size terracotta figures buried in massive underground pits and arranged in precise military formations. Most of these statues are warriors, infantrymen, archers, cavalry soldiers, and generals, each sculpted with astonishing realism. No two faces are exactly alike. Some appear calm and disciplined, others stern, weary, or fiercely alert. Hairstyles, facial hair, armor styles, and even subtle expressions differ from figure to figure, suggesting that they may have been modeled after real soldiers. It was as if an entire army had been frozen in time, standing silently beneath the earth for more than 2 millennia. The warriors were not alone. Archaeologists also uncovered full-size terracotta horses, wooden chariots reinforced with bronze, and weapons such as swords, spears, crossbows, and arrowheads, many of which were still sharp. Some bronze weapons were coated with a mysterious chromium-based treatment that prevented corrosion, a technological feat that baffled scientists for decades. But the Terracotta Army was not meant to fight any earthly battle. This vast underground force was created as part of a mausoleum complex for Qin Shi Huang, the man who unified China in 221 BC and declared himself its first emperor. Qin ascended to the throne much earlier, in 246 BC, as king of the Qin state. And from the very beginning of his reign, he began planning his afterlife. Qin Shi Huang was obsessed with immortality. He feared death, commissioned alchemists to search for elixirs of eternal life, and sent expeditions across the seas in pursuit of mythical islands where immortals were said to dwell. Ironically, these efforts may have hastened his death. Some historical accounts suggest he died after ingesting mercury-based potions believed to grant eternal life. Yet if he could not live forever, Qin intended to rule forever in death. The Terracotta Army was designed to protect him in the afterlife, just as real armies had protected him in life. Ancient Chinese beliefs held that the next world mirrored the earthly one, and a ruler's power depended on the resources and servants buried with them. Earlier dynasties often buried real people, concubines, servants, and soldiers, alive or killed to accompany their rulers. Qin's solution was different, but no less extreme. Instead of human sacrifices, he ordered thousands of clay substitutes, each crafted with meticulous care. Construction of the mausoleum is believed to have involved over 700,000 workers, including artisans, laborers, and convicts. Work continued for decades, even after Qin unified China. The sheer logistics of producing thousands of individualized statues, each weighing hundreds of pounds, remains staggering. The warriors were originally painted in bright colors: reds, blues, greens, purples, and whites. Sadly, when exposed to air during excavation, much of this pigmentation flaked away within minutes, leaving the muted clay tones seen today. What we see now is only a shadow of how visually striking the army once was. The army is organized into multiple pits, each serving a specific military function. One pit contains the main infantry force, another holds archers and cavalry units, a third appears to be a command center, complete with high-ranking officers. This level of strategic planning mirrors real Qin military doctrine, reinforcing the idea that the army was meant to function as a true fighting force in the afterlife. Yet for all that has been uncovered, the greatest mystery remains untouched. At the center of the complex lies the tomb of Qin Shi Huang himself, marked by a large pyramid-shaped mound. Despite decades of research, archaeologists have never opened the tomb. Why? Ancient texts, particularly the writings of historian Sima Qian, describe the tomb as a subterranean palace filled with unimaginable wonders and deadly dangers. According to these accounts, rivers of liquid mercury were made to flow through the tomb, representing the rivers and seas of China. Mechanical crossbows were allegedly installed to fire at intruders. The ceiling was said to be inlaid with gemstones depicting the stars. Modern science has provided eerie support for these legends. Soil samples taken around the tomb show abnormally high levels of mercury, suggesting that the ancient accounts may be disturbingly accurate. Because of concerns about structural collapse, toxic exposure, and irreversible damage to artifacts using current technology, Chinese authorities have chosen to leave the tomb sealed for now. Qin Shi Huang still rests undisturbed, guarded by his silent army. Even without entering the central tomb, archaeologists have made startling discoveries around its perimeter. Additional pits have revealed terracotta figures of dancers, musicians, acrobats, officials, and animals, suggesting that Qin intended to recreate his entire imperial court in the afterlife, not just its military might. This transforms the mausoleum from a burial site into a miniature underground empire. The Terracotta Army also raises deeper, more unsettling questions. Were the statues modeled after real soldiers who served Qin? Did the craftsmen leave hidden signatures or messages within the figures? Were workers killed to keep the tomb's secrets, as some legends claim? So far, no definitive evidence answers these questions, but the scale of the project suggests an authoritarian regime capable of extraordinary control and sacrifice. Today, the Terracotta Army is considered one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in human history, and a symbol of China's ancient ingenuity and ambition. Millions of visitors travel to Xi'an each year to stand before the ranks of silent warriors, each one a reminder of a ruler who refused to accept mortality. Yet perhaps the strangest part of all is this. Despite decades of excavation, experts believe that only a fraction of the site has been explored. Vast areas remain buried, their contents unknown. Entire sections of the army, or something even more unexpected, may still lie hidden beneath the soil. For over 2,200 years, the terracotta warriors waited in darkness, fulfilling their duty without movement or sound. They were never meant to be seen by the living. They were created for an emperor who believed his power would transcend death itself, and in a way, he was right. Qin Shi Huang's empire fell shortly after his death, but his army endured. Buried, forgotten, and rediscovered by chance, the terracotta warriors continued to stand guard, not just over their emperor, but over one of history's most haunting reminders of humanity's obsession with power, legacy, and eternity. Atacama Desert and the mystery of the tiny human, or alien. In 2003, a discovery in one of the driest places on Earth ignited a storm of speculation that blurred the line between science and science fiction. Deep in the Atacama Desert of northern Chile, an abandoned mining town yielded a bizarre find: a 6-inch tall skeleton, naturally mummified, with an elongated, pointed skull, slanted eye sockets, and an appearance so unusual that many who saw it immediately jumped to a startling conclusion. This was not human. At least, that's what some believed. Photos of the tiny skeleton, soon nicknamed Ata, spread rapidly through UFO forums, documentaries, and fringe scientific communities. Claims ranged from extraterrestrial origins to time travelers, hybrids, or even a previously unknown intelligent species. The skeleton's proportions seemed impossible. Its head was oversized, its rib count appeared abnormal, and its bones looked far more developed than those of a typical infant. But unlike many alleged alien artifacts, Ata didn't remain in the realm of speculation for long. Science stepped in. At first glance, the skeleton defied conventional expectations. Measuring just 15 centimeters, about 6 inches, in length, Ata was far smaller than any known human fetus carried to term. Yet X-ray analysis revealed something deeply unsettling. The bones appeared remarkably mature. The density and structure of the skeleton resembled that of a human child around 6 years old, not a newborn or fetus. This contradiction fueled the mystery. How could a being so tiny possess bones that looked years old? Some researchers pointed to the skull. It was elongated and cone-shaped, with a sharply pointed cranium that didn't match known human developmental stages. The rib cage appeared to contain fewer ribs than normal, and the proportions of the limbs seemed off. Combined, these features made Ata look almost cartoonishly alien. For years, the skeleton was studied informally, often outside mainstream academic institutions. That only added to the controversy. Critics accused researchers of sensationalism, while believers accused scientists of suppressing the truth. Eventually, modern genetics would provide the most definitive answers yet. Using advanced DNA sequencing techniques, researchers extracted genetic material from Ata's bones, a remarkable feat given the mummy's age and condition. The results were clear on one crucial point. Ata was human. Genetic analysis revealed that Ata was female and most closely related to indigenous Chilean populations, with traces of European ancestry as well. This placed her firmly within the known human genetic family tree, ruling out extraterrestrial or non-human origins once and for all. But while the DNA answered what Ata was, it raised new questions about how she came to look the way she did. The sequencing revealed something extraordinary. Ata carried 7 distinct genetic mutations in genes associated with growth, skeletal development, and bone formation. Some of these mutations are known to cause dwarfism, craniofacial abnormalities, or accelerated bone maturation. Others are extremely rare, or had never been observed together in a single individual. In modern medicine, even one of these mutations can result in severe developmental disorders. Ata had 7. Researchers believe this unusual combination may explain the paradox of her appearance, a body frozen at an extremely small size, but with bones that matured far beyond what that size would suggest. In essence, her skeleton may have aged faster than her body could grow. Yet even with this explanation, many uncertainties remain. Scientists still don't know which mutation, or combination of mutations, was primarily responsible for her extreme form, nor do they know whether Ata was born alive, how long she lived, or what her life may have been like. Some experts believe she may have survived for only a short time after birth, while others argue that the bone development suggests she lived for several years. Adding to the mystery is the fact that Ata was found alone, without a grave, coffin, or burial goods. This raises difficult questions about how she was treated in life and death. Was she abandoned due to fear or stigma? Did her appearance mark her as something unnatural to those around her? Or was her burial simply lost to time and circumstance? The Atacama Desert itself played a crucial role in preserving the body. One of the driest environments on Earth, it naturally mummifies organic material, slowing decay to a crawl. This is why Ata's bones, tissues, and DNA remained intact enough for study centuries later. Still, the ethics surrounding Ata's discovery and handling have sparked controversy. Chilean scientists and indigenous groups have criticized how the remains were removed, studied, and circulated internationally. Some argue that Ata was treated less like a human child and more like a curiosity, exhibited in documentaries and debates without proper cultural respect. Calls have been made for her remains to be returned and laid to rest according to local customs. This ethical dimension adds another layer to the story, reminding us that behind every mystery is a once living person. Despite the scientific consensus, Ata's story continues to be cited in alien lore. For some, the idea that such a strange being could be just human feels less satisfying than the possibility of something otherworldly. Others point to how much remains unknown about genetics and development as proof that the case isn't fully closed. But from a scientific perspective, Ata may represent something even more profound than an alien encounter. She is evidence of how fragile and complex human development truly is. 7 rare mutations intersected in one individual, producing a form never seen before and possibly never seen again. Ata's body became a biological anomaly, one that challenges medical assumptions and highlights how much we still don't understand about growth, genetics, and skeletal formation. In a strange way, the truth is more unsettling than the myth. Ata was not a visitor from another world. She was human, born into this one with a combination of genetic conditions so extreme that her body appeared impossible. Her story forces us to confront how easily the unfamiliar is labeled alien, and how quickly science fiction can overshadow human reality. Today, Ata remains one of the most misunderstood archaeological discoveries of the modern era. She has been called an alien, a hoax, a monster, and a miracle of science. But stripped of speculation, she represents something quieter and more haunting. A child who lived and died with extraordinary differences, leaving behind a mystery written in bone and DNA. The Atacama Desert has preserved countless traces of ancient life, but few have sparked as much global fascination as this tiny skeleton. Ata reminds us that the strangest discoveries don't always come from outer space. Sometimes they come from the deepest, most unexplored corners of human biology itself. Chiribaya Culture Cemetery and the Ancient Pet Cemetery. When archaeologists excavate ancient cemeteries, they expect to find human remains, bones that tell stories of diet, disease, violence, and ritual. But during an excavation south of Lima, Peru, one researcher uncovered something far more emotionally striking than she anticipated. Alongside the human dead were dozens of carefully buried dogs. The discovery was made by Sonia Guillen, who was studying a 1,000-year-old cemetery belonging to the Chiribaya culture, a sophisticated society that flourished along Peru's southern coast centuries before the rise of the Inca Empire. What began as a routine excavation quickly turned into one of the most touching archaeological discoveries in South America. Scattered among the human graves were 43 dog burials, each deliberately placed, carefully positioned, and clearly respected. These were not food remains. They were not sacrificial offerings tossed into pits. These dogs had been loved. The Chiribaya culture thrived in a harsh desert environment between roughly AD 900 and 1350. Despite the unforgiving climate, they developed advanced irrigation systems, practiced agriculture, and herded llamas across difficult terrain. In this demanding lifestyle, dogs played a crucial role. They were working animals, used primarily to herd llamas, protect settlements, and assist in daily tasks. But the cemetery revealed that their value went far beyond utility. Each dog was given its own grave, often located near the burial of a human, likely its owner or caretaker. This spatial closeness suggests a personal bond that extended into the afterlife. The Chiribaya did not simply bury their dogs alongside people out of convenience. They made a conscious choice to keep them together in death. just as they had been in life. Even more telling were the burial goods. Many of the dogs were interred with treats, food offerings, and woven blankets wrapped around their bodies. Some were carefully positioned as if sleeping. These details are powerful indicators of affection and respect. In a world where resources were limited and survival was never guaranteed, the decision to dedicate time and materials to animal burials speaks volumes. The desert climate of southern Peru played a crucial role in preserving this remarkable scene. The extreme dryness naturally mummified many of the dogs, leaving fur, skin, and even facial features intact. Unlike skeletal remains, these preserved bodies allowed researchers to see exactly what the animals looked like when they were alive. What Guillen and her team noticed immediately was how distinctive the dogs appeared. They were medium-sized, long-haired, with pointed snouts, upright ears, and a build well-suited for endurance and herding. To modern eyes, they looked strikingly similar to a little-known contemporary breed often referred to as the Chiribaya dog, or Peruvian shepherd dog, a type of dog still found in parts of Peru today. The resemblance was too strong to ignore. This raised an intriguing possibility. These ancient dogs may be the direct ancestors of a modern breed that has survived, largely unrecognized, for over 1,000 years. If proven, it would make the Chiribaya dog one of the oldest continuously existing dog lineages in the Americas. Guillen's team began investigating whether this resemblance was more than coincidence. By studying skull shapes, body proportions, and preserved fur patterns, they built a compelling anatomical case. The next step, still ongoing, is to establish a genetic link between the ancient mummies and living dogs in the region. If DNA evidence confirms the connection, it would be a rare example of a prehistoric dog breed maintaining its identity despite conquest, colonization, and cultural collapse. In many ancient societies, animals appear in burials only as symbols or sacrifices. At Chiribaya, the dogs were neither. They were companions. The care shown in their burial mirrors how humans have mourned pets across cultures and centuries, even into the modern world. This challenges the assumption that deep emotional bonds between humans and animals are a recent development. Instead, the Chiribaya cemetery suggests that the human-dog relationship in the Americas was already deeply personal over 1,000 years ago. These people recognized their dogs as individuals worthy of remembrance, comfort, and dignity in death. The discovery also offers insight into Chiribaya beliefs about the afterlife. Burying dogs near their owners implies that the Chiribaya may have believed animals accompanied humans beyond death, serving as protectors, guides, or companions in the next world. Similar beliefs appear in other ancient cultures, but physical evidence of such practices is rare. What makes this site especially unusual is its scale. 1 or 2 animal burials could be symbolic. 43 is a pattern. This was not an isolated ritual, it was a cultural norm. The dog's condition also provides valuable information about how they lived. Many showed signs of good health, proper nutrition, and long lives, further evidence that they were cared for, not merely worked to exhaustion. Unlike some ancient working animals, these dogs were not disposable tools. They mattered. Tragically, the Chiribaya culture itself did not survive. By the time the Inca Empire expanded into the region in the 15th century, the Chiribaya had already disappeared, likely due to environmental changes, social upheaval, or absorption into neighboring cultures. Their settlements faded, their irrigation systems fell silent, and their names were lost to history. But their dogs remained. Preserved by desert sands and human affection, the Chiribaya dogs became unexpected ambassadors of a vanished people. Through them, archaeologists can glimpse daily life, emotional bonds, and cultural values that stone tools and pottery alone could never convey. Today, Guillen's work has reshaped how scholars view animals in ancient Andean societies. The Chiribaya Pet Cemetery stands as one of the earliest and clearest examples of companion animal burial in the Americas. It also resonates deeply with modern audiences. Across time, culture, and geography, humans have shared their lives with dogs, working alongside them, trusting them, and mourning them. The Chiribaya cemetery proves that this connection is not a modern sentiment, but an ancient one. More than 1,000 years ago, in a harsh desert south of Lima, people wrapped their dogs in blankets, left them food for the journey ahead, and laid them gently into the earth. In doing so, they left behind one of archaeology's most tender reminders that love, loyalty, and companionship are as old as civilization itself.